Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, January 6th. We have an accumulating snow event coming to the mid-Atlantic region and the northeastern part of the nation tonight and on Friday, and it will put down a moderate accumulation, most likely in the D.C., Philadelphia, New York City corridor of perhaps 3 to 6 inch range for this entire region. A little bit on the lower side of things, maybe in the DC area, the higher side of things up across New York City. By the time you get up to Boston, maybe the 4 to 8 inch range. A pretty healthy storm. The limiting factor is that it's a fast moving storm. The positive factor for snow accumulations is that, first of all, it's a very cold air mass, so that lessens the chance of any kind of mixing. Even in the big cities, it looks like an entire snow event for DC, Philadelphia, New York City, Boston. How often do you say that confidently? Also, because of the nature of the air mass, the cold, dry air, the snow will be tend to be more on the lighter, fluffier side. That tends to accumulate a little bit easier than heavier, wet snow. One thing we have to watch for, and I do believe this will take place, mesoscale heavier snow bands that will form, especially on the northeast side of DC and all the way across southeastern Pennsylvania into New York and all along eastern Long Island. Again, heavier snow bands. We'll talk about that over the next couple of minutes because of low to mid-level frontogenetic force and basically some upward motion in the atmosphere that can form these tight, narrow, heavier snow bands. And of course, if you're underneath a heavier snow band, your accumulations will quickly go up, maybe 1 to 2 inch snowfall rates in these heavier snow bands. First, let's kind of look at a bigger picture here, longer range, before we get into the details of the upcoming snow event for tonight and Friday in the mid-Atlantic and northeast U.S. First of all, let's look at North America as a whole using the operational run of the GFS from 0Z last night. I've talked about the cold in Alaska that has been very persistent, and the main reason I've been harping on the Alaska cold is that is often an important source region of cold for the central and eastern U.S. Indeed, over the next several days, we have not one but two different outbreaks. One that just arrived in the mid-Atlantic region and northeast U.S., and that had its origins western Canada, Alaska, and another one early next week. And here's Alaska, first of all, right now. Still hanging on to some very cold air. In fact, yesterday morning, there was a low temperature reading, an official measurement of minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit in a small town called Chicken, Alaska. Minus 60 degrees. That's the kind of cold we're dealing with up in Alaska and western Canada, and it has broken loose and headed to the south and east. Now let's just continue this pattern again. The cold air mass, this initial Arctic blast has arrived in the mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S. That's why the upcoming event will be snow in the big cities on Thursday night and Friday. Now let's move forward here, and here we go. This is now on Friday itself, just a very cold air mass accompanying this storm system for later tonight and on Friday. And look at the buildup, the rebuilding of the cold air on top of very deep snow. We talked yesterday about some record-breaking snow for the month of December in Alaska. That helps under clear skies and dark conditions, almost 24 hours. It helps to regenerate some cold air, and here we go. It's regenerating here tomorrow morning, already up in the western part of Canada. And first Arctic blast eases over the latter part of the upcoming weekend, but here goes another one breaking off from Alaska, from western Canada, southeast towards the central and ultimately into the northeast. This is a doozy of a cold air mass that looks like it'll come with snow cover this time. Almost looks like throughout the mid-Atlantic region and the northeast U.S. That's not the case right now. There's snow on the ground across places like D.C., the Delmarva, southern New Jersey, central New Jersey coastline. After tonight's system and tomorrow, Philly, New York City, Boston ought to get in on the action with some snow cover as well. So when this arrives here early next week, it'll be a real a news-making kind of a cold event here, with the temperature certainly dropping down into the teens in the big cities of D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, maybe even lower than that, in the single digits up along the I-95 corridor region from New York City up north and east. And by the way, Friday night, following this snow event, will be very cold as well with this first Arctic blast. But just take a look at that, and that pushes on through into the Middle Atlantic, the Northeast U.S., with temperatures some 20 degrees or more below normal. When you're in January and you're 20 degrees below normal with snow cover, look out. The heating bills are going to be pretty ugly after this cold wave, and there are more cold waves on the way. Let's go all the way into Tuesday morning, still hanging on throughout the eastern U.S., and especially hard hit will be New England with this cold shot coming early next week. Now let's take a look at the longer range here before we focus in on tonight's system, using the 500 millibar height anomaly maps from the 0Z run of the GFS. This is the operational version, not the ensemble version. And I talked yesterday about a teleconnection index known as the PNA, the Pacific North American Index. And indeed, that is sending signals to me that a big change is happening, already underway. It's going from negative territory up towards neutral and positive territory. When the PNA relaxes or goes back to neutral or even positive territory, the jet streak that you can see right here, kind of some indications here of a pattern that allows some upper level winds to be quite strong in this fashion, and that often blocks the cold air from coming into the central and eastern U.S. But we'll watch what happens over the next several days with that change in the PNA. A ridge basically will start to pop up along the west coast of Canada and across western Canada, and that really can produce some cold air masses into the central and eastern U.S. So we're not talking about cold just for the this late week and early next week. We're talking about some more cold air outbreaks coming later on this month as well. Let's move forward here, and here's the upper level low associated with the snow event for the Mid-Atlantic region, Northeast U.S. later on tonight into the day on Friday. Now let's keep moving forward here. That kicks on out, and we do get warmer on Sunday in the eastern part of the nation, but again, that'll be just a temporary warm-up. It could be some rain, sleet, or snow showers associated with that milder air trying to come into the Mid-Atlantic region, Northeast U.S. But then we go forward, and we just saw a moment ago another cold air outbreak dropping from Alaska, western Canada, into the south central Canada, and then into the central and eastern U.S. by early next week. And look at the change in the upper level pattern as we get into the latter part of the week. And we talked about the change in the jet stream from the northeastern Pacific Ocean into the western, northwestern part of the U.S. And all of a sudden you have this kind of a flow here, and this is what is really opening up the floodgates for cold air from Alaska, western Canada to come into the central and eastern U.S. Remember, we started off this pattern with kind of a wind flow like this, and it changes to something from the northwest to the southeast as a strong ridge starts to pop out there, as signaled by that change in the PNA. And by the way, the NAO and the AO teleconnection indices tend to turn negative as well, kind of supporting the idea of more cold air outbreaks down the road into the central and eastern U.S. Let's move forward here. This is associated with that cold blast for early next week. And then let's just move forward. I want to show one interesting bit of information coming around the middle of the month, 15th, 16th, 17th time period in January. Looks very interesting here in the eastern U.S. Maybe some signals here for a big storm. Again, the middle of January. We're moving forward all the way to now January 14th here time frame. And again, look at this ridge that has popped up over the western part of Canada. And a flow like this bringing cold air from way up in Canada down into the southeastern, down to the southeast into the central U.S. And by the time we get to about the 15th, 16th time frame, right here we have on Sunday the 16th, deep upper level low setting up over the eastern U.S. A flow of air that absolutely will allow for some cold air masses to come into the central and eastern U.S. A lot of blocking up along Greenland. This is a time period to watch. It's way out there in the speculation phase, but the middle of the month, 15th, 16th, 17th time frame, could result in some kind of a big event in the eastern part of the nation. Well, let's stop looking ahead and focus in on tonight's system and tomorrow's system in the Mid-Atlantic region. Here we are beginning the day on Thursday. Colder air filtering in now behind a frontal passage in the overnight hours. And here is the wave of energy associated with our developing system. First, low pressure will start to form over the southeast U.S. and then intensify as it moves off the Mid-Atlantic coastline and moves rather quickly. By midday Friday, this storm system will be east of Maine. That's how quickly it'll move over the next 24 hours or so from the southeastern states later today to off the Maine coastline by midday on Friday. And again, that is a limiting factor for snow. It's why this is not going to turn into a major snowstorm. By major, I mean 6+ inches of snow. A moderate snowstorm, however, is in the cards here. Let's move forward here. And here we go. It moves to the east here. This wave of energy, and that is the main the culprit for developing this low pressure area that will spread some accumulating snow, D.C. all the way up to Boston later on tonight into the day on Friday. That passes on by. Saturday remains quite cold. Then there's a bit of a warm-up on Sunday. Here's the Sunday morning forecast map. Be a bit of a warm-up here, and again, with that mild air coming in, could have some rain, sleet, or snow showers. It does raise temperatures probably into the 40s Sunday afternoon in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, but then the next cold shot arrives early next week, back down in the deep freeze early next week. Now, one of the things I talked about up front is the possibility of some mesoscale, or it's a fancy way of saying small scale, heavier snow bands that look likely to form later on tonight into the day on Friday. If you get underneath a heavy snow band, you may see snowfall rates of 1 to 2 inches an hour, and this can happen, I think, anywhere from, let's say, just about the northeast side of D.C., certainly across southeastern Pennsylvania, and all throughout New Jersey, New York City, and up along the eastern part of New England. We can, in those areas, experience mesoscale, heavier snow bands. One of the things I like to look at in this short-range time frame is frontogenetic forcing, basically difference in temperatures in the low middle levels of the atmosphere, kind of frontogenesis type parts of the atmosphere can really point out areas where small-scale heavy snow bands can form. And so that's what we're looking at here. Forecast maps of 700 millibar, mid-level frontogenetic forcing. Later on tonight, watch what happens in the Mid-Atlantic region. It's these purple lines right here. This is from the operational run of the GFS. And if it's showing up, by the way, on the GFS, which is kind of a broader scale, a synoptic scale type of model, it's pretty impressive. Generally, you can see these more so on these higher resolution models here, but it's really showing up in purple lines right here. Watch what happens. Look at this. By the time we get to about midnight or 1 a.m., 2 a.m. time frame, very impressive frontogenetic forcing, really on the north side of D.C. all the way across southeastern Pennsylvania, starting to show up here in New York City. This is later on tonight. Again, there can be some heavy snow. These mesoscale snow bands, anywhere from, let's say, the north side of D.C. and certainly across southeastern Pennsylvania, up across New Jersey, into New York City. That then just explodes across eastern New England, this 700 millibar frontogenetic forcing by early tomorrow morning. Again, watch out for these heavy snow bands later on tonight into the morning hours and certainly through the day in the eastern part of New England. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from the Zero-Z GFS model run. Dry today. No problems, by the way, with the evening rush hour, the Thursday evening rush hour. No problems in D.C. or Philly or anywhere north and east. Problems will be tomorrow morning, Friday morning. And here we go. This is now 7 o'clock this evening. Probably arrival times maybe 9 p.m. or so in the D.C. metro region, 10, 11, Philadelphia, maybe midnight in New York City. And here we go by 1 a.m. the forecast map. Again, some heavier snow bands. Heavier snow is possible with this, even in the D.C. metro region with that low-level, mid-level frontogenetic forcing. The low-pressure area jumps off the mid-Atlantic coastline. It is a fairly quick mover. Wraps up pretty much by dawn in the D.C. metro region, maybe 9, 10 a.m. in Philadelphia, maybe noontime in New York City. And here is kind of a conglomerate of low-pressure areas off the New England coastline by early tomorrow morning. It really intensifies as it moves to the north and east, but a fairly quick mover. Here we are by midday on Friday off the east coast of Maine, intensifying all along the way down to a 981 millibars here by midday on Friday. Heavy snow at this time along the coastal sections of New England all the way down to Cape Cod and Boston. Boston may be in line for maybe 4 to 8 inches of snow out of this, and anywhere along that I-95 corridor region, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, there certainly can be some isolated higher amounts. Again, I'm thinking generally 3 to 6 inch range from D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City, maybe 4 to 8 in Boston. Isolated higher amounts up and down the I-95 corridor region. That passes on by, and by later on tomorrow night, we have very, very cold air. The teens very likely all the way down to D.C. with fresh snow cover, strong northwest winds on the backside of this storm system. Talking Friday night, temperatures dropping way down into the teens in many areas along the I-95 corridor region, and then another Arctic blast comes early next week. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist